Okay, here's the monthly wrap up for May 2026. Got 9 books on the docket. I'm going to rank them categorically. Before we get into that, though, if you want to do the Traumatic Book Club this month, we're reading Notes from Underground by Fyodor Dostoevsky. If you want to participate, all you have to do is read this book in June, and then I'm going to post a video. If you've read it, you can comment, see if other people have read it. Maybe talk to them, talk to me, whatever. Other than that, in my description, got Goodreads and an email, and I just put all my videos into playlists, like book hauls, shelf tours, monthly wrap-ups, mini reviews, whatever. So if you're interested in seeing different kinds of videos from now on, you can just click on the playlist. Yeah, that's every video that I've ever made. So that's that. Okay, starting out with the lowest tier from this past month, this all belongs to one author, but we're going to go in the bad, very bad poop tier. It's all one category. And that would be all by Martha Wells, Artificial Condition, Rogue Protocol, and Exit Strategy. These are books 2 through 4 of the Murderbot Diaries series, featuring the socially anxious, Netflix-loving robot Murderbot. And I've decided not to rail against Martha Wells. I don't know how she did it. I don't know how she hoodwinked like hundreds of thousands of people into reading these books, but good for her. It's one of the biggest cases of fraud I think I've ever seen. I can provide details about why I think so, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to say I think these books are terrible. And we're going to move on. Next up, we have the average tier. This is going to be like my 3-star books. Like, they weren't awful, but they weren't great. Like, I found some good in each of these, but nothing to lift them up into, like, I would really want to read these or really want to recommend these again. So we have 3 books in the average tier. The first one being, and I've read most of these on ebook, or I got them from the library, so that's why I don't have many of these. But first up will be Oathbreakers by Matthew Gabriel and David M. Perry. They wrote The Bright Ages by, David M. Perry. This is a new history of medieval Europe, but Oathbreakers is the story of the Carolingian Civil War in the 9th century A.D. The Carolingians are the dynasty that emerged from Charles Martel and Charlemagne, with the Frankish peoples who have occupied territory in Germany and France after the fall of the Roman Empire. And the grandsons of Charlemagne, due to some issues with succession, had a big civil war. Or not a big civil war, but for that time in that area it was actually pretty big. But this eventually led to the downfall of the Carolingian Empire, which had reached such great heights, with Charlemagne being crowned Holy Roman Emperor and getting all these territory and fighting with the new Islamic empires that were cropping up and spreading towards Europe. So actually a pretty interesting time, and the book wasn't written especially well. It was the book is written in a kind of dumb pop history way where it's easy to understand the sentences, but it feels like the authors are kind of dumbing it down even for pop history. I know I say this a lot when I'm talking about history, but there's a way to do pop history and still respect the reader, and I wish more authors would do that. Maybe it's just they don't have enough skill at writing compared to being a historian, and so that the sentences to me felt like a college AP essay. Like there was no punch, there was no, nothing was evocative. Not that you really need it, but I like interesting writing. And I've seen interesting writing, or good, vibrant writing from historians. This wasn't it, but the subject matter was really interesting to me. I've never studied Charlemagne or the Carolingians in any depth, so I really enjoyed the topics. Of course, for the Civil War, we needed a lot of context, so we got how did the Carolingian Empire start, what did Charlemagne do, and what happened between him and his grandsons and his son, Louis the Pious. So yeah, in terms of content and subject matter, really liked that. It was informative, but not too... It was accessible for the new reader of that time period in that in Central Europe at that time. But of course, I have to comment on the writing, and I didn't like the writing style that much. But yeah, if you're interested in Charlemagne or the creation of modern France and Germany in the Middle Ages, an interesting book, and there's a lot of... I know there's no... there are no footnotes. There are notes, but there's no footnotes to direct you there, which is so annoying. There are a lot of good references to European Middle Age, one, primary sources, and two, like older secondary works that it might be of more interest. So I like that as well. I wrote down a lot of books to read from there. So decent book overall. Okay, next in the average tier, we have the Song of Roland. This is a connecting work to Oathbreakers in that it also deals with Charlemagne. But this is a French medieval epic poem from the 11th century, I believe. But it was an oral tradition, an epic poem that was eventually written down. And I made a whole video on this, so I'm not going to talk about it much. But it basically is a revisionist history of a tragedy that happened during Charlemagne's time in Spain when he was fighting. His rear guard was slaughtered by some Basques, Basque Christians. And a couple centuries later, it got changed into they were set upon by hordes of treacherous Muslims. It was kind of a French patriotic epic of the Christians fighting the Muslims. But if we're actually looking at the poem, it was kind of fun to read, really repetitive and violent. But it tells the story of Roland, who was the nephew of Charlemagne in this myth. I think there was a real Roland. I don't know if he was that important, though. But it tells of how Roland and his friends are set upon by, are betrayed and attacked in the shadows of the Pyrenees. And this is a pretty short epic poem. It's 4,000 lines-ish. This Penguin Classic, translated by Dorothy Sayers, is 200 pages. There's a lot better epic poems out there, but if you're interested in Penguin Classics or old epic poems and you haven't read this one, it's short. It's okay. And yeah, average. And the final book in the average tier would be Bulfinch's Mythology by Thomas Bulfinch. This is a big work of myth. It covers Greco-Roman myths, the myths of King Arthur, the legends of Charlemagne, which includes Song of Roland, and that derives from some Italian epic poems like Ariosto and Boiardo. But yeah, Bulfinch is writing this in the 1850s, 1860s, and he's just writing down these myths for like the common person, the layman of that time period. I covered this in my most recent YouTube video, I think, but this was, I liked a lot of the Greco-Roman myths, but I had already read those. It was harder for me to get into the myths of King Arthur and Charlemagne because I wasn't familiar with those before. And those were a lot more repetitive and less interesting, yet less unique. It felt like in the Greco-Roman myths, these people are asking questions about the world and they're trying to explain why things are the way they are. Like, oh, why is that mountain so big? Or why is there a river that runs through this gorge? Or why are the stars there? Like these were interesting questions that revolved around the natural world. The King Arthur and Charlemagne ones were just people fighting and being chivalrous, and there weren't there weren't many interesting stories there. It was just like people being heroic and saving damsels in distress. And some of the stories were interesting, but if you read like 500 pages in a row of that in this big hardcover, it's kind of annoying, and I didn't think it was that great. But average work overall, really impressive what Bill Finch did with this. I don't know if his scholarship, his mythos scholarship is still standard, but if you're interested in it, at least pick up a copy and poke through it. Like, it's a good reference work nonetheless. So that's Bull Finch's mythology. Okay. Next up, I want to move to the final tier. Technically, these are the good to really good, like 4 stars out of 5. I know star ratings don't really mean anything, but like good to really good, I think covers that. It's kind of boring qualifiers that I gave to that good and really good, but not 5-star. That's what I mean. But we have 3 books in this category. The first being The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien, which I have read many times. I have not read it physically in a while. I read it a lot as a kid, actually. But when I returned to it, I thought, a couple of years ago, I thought it would be fun to do the Andy Serkis audiobook. Just because I knew the story so well. I'm not a huge fan of audiobooks, but that was a good one. And this past month, what did I do? It was an ebook. I did an ebook on my Kobo. But it's the same old story. There's, as most people say, it's such a cozy read. It's always a really fun time to just settle into the world with Bilbo Baggins and Gandalf and all the dwarves and go on their little trek to the Lonely Mountain, encounter some danger, overcome some adversity, get a little greedy at the end. But yeah, I've never not liked The Hobbit. That it's not a perfect read for me because it's not boring, but there's nothing in it that sets me over the edge of like, man, that was awesome. It's just comforting and a good read, and I've always thought that, and I'm sure I will continue to think that. But a lot of times in rereads, I like unlock something new or something I didn't think about or anything. Here, there was nothing. I didn't lose anything, but I didn't gain anything in terms of what The Hobbit is or what it means to me. So for that reason, still in the good to really good. I always recommend The Hobbit if you like fantasy. Yeah, The Hobbit. All right. Penultimate book, I have this one. This is a play. It's a play, and I was really surprised by it. That is Man of La Mancha by Dale Wasserman. But you can see that's Don Quixote here. This is not an adaptation exactly of Don Quixote, but it is adapted from the material of Don Quixote. Of course, this is a tiny play. It's 126 pages, including introductions. This was apparently a very famous play in the 60s. It came out in the 60s, but then I think it had further runs, and there was a song, The Impossible Quest, which is famous. I've actually talked to some people since reading this, and they knew the song, The Impossible Quest. But all the songs in the play are actually in the book. Like, this is at least 95% accurate to what the play was, because I listened to every single song on the original play soundtrack. There were a couple tiny differences from the what this play had, but yeah, this kind of combines the life of Don Quixote and the author of Don Quixote, Miguel Cervantes, in that Cervantes is, at the beginning of the play, he's thrown in jail and by the Spanish Inquisition, and then he, with the other prisoners, I won't get into why he's doing this, he puts on a play with the other prisoners acting of this project he's been working on, which ends up being Don Quixote. But if you know the story of Don Quixote, in this play within the play, they go through basically the first little adventure with Quixote and Sancho Panza, and most of it centers around the encounter at the castle, which is what Don Quixote thinks the roadside inn they stop at is. But at this inn, there's a lot of different unruly escapades in which Don Quixote, he's this manic, delusional knight. He's not a knight, he's a guy who thinks that he's a chivalric knight. He's read too many romances of the past. And the delusion is he thinks that he is a knight, and he thinks that windmills are ogres or monsters, and gosh, I forgot whatever that comparison is. And he thinks the inn's a castle, and he thinks this ugly maid Dulcinea, or this ugly maid, is his true beautiful princess love Dulcinea. But yeah, this play does a great job of capturing the spirit of Don Quixote. As I said in a prior wrap-up, it does take liberties with the character of Dulcinea and combines it with a prostitute at the roadside inn. But I thought that made for a really sweet relationship, not licentious, between Don Quixote and this new Dulcinea. But yeah, for such a short play, really impactful, at least I thought as a reader of Don Quixote, captured the same or a similar emotional depth, but still not as good as Don Quixote. Man of La Mancha. And the final book for May 2026 is actually the final book I read in May 2026. But I think it was the best, and that's not recency bias. This will be The King in Yellow by Robert W. Chambers. This is an 1895 short story collection. And I read this on Project Gutenberg through my e-reader for free, which is a great way to read old books. You don't have to buy them. But the reason I read The King in Yellow is because I heard it was one of the progenitors of weird fiction, this genre that's kind of pinnacled by H.P. Lovecraft, but there's a lot of other guys that I've heard about, or authors that I've heard talked about, like Ambrose Bierce, Arthur Machen, Algernon Blackwood, some other people. But one of the beginning guys there was Robert W. Chambers. And I've heard The King in Yellow is a beautiful and haunting book. I didn't know it was a short story collection. But I had heard some good reviews, so I picked it up. And I will say, Robert W. Chambers has a writing style that I really mesh with. I thought it was beautiful and descriptive. And at 1895, he's at the tail end of the Victorian age. He was a American writer, though. But a lot of these stories are set in New York or Paris. And I saw it described as fin de siècle, and I thought that the writing agreed with that. The prose style agreed with that. It was a little different than a lot of Victorian authors that I've read, but there's that fin de siècle sense of the decadent and the aesthetic that really bled through in the prose that I like. Oscar Wilde, for example, when he's going well in Picture of Dorian Gray, I think when Robert W. Chambers is going well in King in Yellow, he was, I don't know if he was up there with Wilde, but he was really tickling my brain. There is something to mention about The King in Yellow. The first four stories are all connected, and they're about this play called The King in Yellow, or this book. Is it a play or a book? I can't remember. This book, you read it regardless, but this piece of literature, The King in Yellow, which basically turns people mad when they read it. And I have an average length review on my Goodreads that I think you will see captures the spirit of these first four stories. They're all about madness and beauty and the corruption of the soul and the mind. And those are four of the best stories I think I've ever read. They were, one, beautiful reads, two, truly disturbing reads. The paranoia and the uneasiness that you feel, the way that Chambers kind of gets into your mind and disturbs you. And I felt like the reader might even be afraid to think about The King in Yellow in case Chambers is getting into your mind and turning you mad. That's just the way that it was really unhinged, but not in a graphic way or a provocative way. Like it was natural, yet it felt so unnatural. So those first four stories were awesome. The rest of the stories, I thought they were good in their own right, but I know a lot of people don't like them because they're not the weird fiction, disturbing style of the first four stories. And once I got over that and I looked at the stories for what they were, I thought they were pretty good, but they're a lot more normal. Most of them deal with these like bohemian art students in Paris, and they're walking around the city and trying to meet girls, and that's about it. There's one of the stories, there's some weird time travel in the moors of Brittany. There's also, during the Franco-Prussian War, a story of survival and hunger, which that one was kind of weird. But overall, this was a great collection, really well written, and you do not want to miss the first four stories in this collection if you're interested in horror at all. Really great stuff. So those four plus the rest of the collection being average to good, that makes it my top read. Especially the first story, which was the Peak. That was Peak Chambers. It's called the Repairer of Reputations. And man, that is one of the most deeply disturbed reading experiences I've ever had. But it was so good. And I want to reread it already, but I have not yet. So that's that. Those are the 9 books that I read in May 2026. And that's it. Thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you later.